Welcome to the inaugural episode of Sports and Compliance, where Tom Fox and Stephen Martin take a look at sports to try to mine them for compliance lessons learned. Today, we take up the sordid saga of Kyrie Irving, the Brooklyn Nets, and their chasing of Edu Udoka as their new head coach. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, and I am with my good friend and colleague, Stephen Martin, and we are thrilled to be bringing you the inaugural episode of Sports and Compliance. Stephen and I have talked about doing this for years, and we finally said, let's do it. So, Stephen, welcome to the pod. I'm so happy we can finally do this.
Thanks, Tom. It's always great to be on your podcast, but it is actually fun. We have talked about doing a sports-related, compliance-focused podcast for a long time, and you've kind of patiently waited for me to be able to be active and do this. And you and I are both big sports fans, so I'm really looking forward to having a lot of discussion about what do we learn about compliance from the sports world.
So, exactly that. And over the years, when I've thought about doing this podcast, I've thought about topics that come up, and oh, that would be a great topic. And then the time would pass and another topic would come up. And what I finally decided that there'll always be a topic around ethics and compliance in sports, and there'll probably be a new one every week.
Yeah.
And we were given one of the juiciest ethical and compliance train wrecks I have ever seen this week with the Brooklyn Nets. So we're going to take a deep dive into what the Brooklyn Nets are up to, the facts of the background facts of this just disaster, and the mistakes we think they may have made, what it means for the compliance professional going forward. It all started out when their co-star Kyrie Irving posted a tweet about a movie called Hebrews to Negroes. That movie is a well-known anti-Semitic movie with lots of anti-Semitic tropes. Kyrie Irving, who claims he's a free thinker, is a well-known flat worlder and anti-vaxxer. So he didn't come to this tweet from nowhere. And he, when confronted with this at a press conference, he perceived he was shocked that anyone questioned about him because he didn't think he did anything wrong in promoting an anti-Semitic film or books on his social media accounts. The Brooklyn Nets, however, felt differently, and they issued a statement strongly condemning any form of hate speech. The Nets owner issued a statement saying he was disappointed in Kyrie appearing to support a book full of anti-Semitic disinformation, and ending his press release with "This is bigger than basketball." The unfortunately now former head coach, and we'll get to that in a minute, was Steve Nash, and Steve Nash said that I hope we can get through this together, and there's an opportunity for us to grow and understand new perspectives. I am not Jewish, but anti-Semitism is one of the greatest travesties in the world, and I just my skin crawls when I see things like this. And now we have the former head coach saying, "Well, let's just talk about this and work this out." So I was pretty disappointed with Steve Nash's comment. Other commentators were not so charitable. The inside the NBA crew of Ernie Johnson, Charles Barkley, Kenny Smith, and Shaquille O'Neal basically ripped Irving. Barkley said he was disappointed the NBA didn't suspend him. Shaq called him an idiot. They didn't pull any punches, and social media was around the same. So what did the Nets do? Well, they do what all organizations do when your top producer lies, cheats, steals, and engages in unethical behavior. They fired the coach. And Steve Nash got fired after going 1-7. He was 97 and 53 over his career at the Nets. the general manager in his press conference said it was his decision, and it was well known that no decision is made on the Nets without consulting their co-stars, specifically Kevin Durant. So pretty disappointed that a player got a coach fired. At least from where I'm sitting, that's what it looks like. But it didn't end there. And this is where Steve and I think we went into the stratosphere of just corporate toxicity and train wreckedness, if I can use that word. Because as in the press conference, the general manager said they were still looking for potential coaches. Well, I think it was in 30 minutes, the Athletic magazine and the #1 NBA reporter, a guy named Woj, reported that former Boston Celtics head coach Ime Udoka was on the verge of being awarded the job. So why would the Nets be looking at a former Celtics head coach? Well, he was suspended, and he was suspended for sexual harassment at the workplace. Now, we've never had the full details of that sexual harassment matter been made public, but he's been known to he was having a consensual affair with another employee. He is married. Somehow after the consensual affair ended, the coach continued harassing his former paramour, and that's what led to the 1-year suspension. So we have a coach suspended for sexual harassment. He's now lined up to be the Nets' next head coach. I even reciting that, Stephen, I still can't believe this series of events. And you and I have lived through a lot of sports cheating and other sports scandals, but this one is just beyond me. So maybe you could step back with your more dispassionate, lawyerly compliance hat and maybe go through some of the things that you think are really problematic here.
Right. Well, I mean, look, the fact that it took you a while to work through all the facts of what's happened with the Nets and the specific coach are kind of amazing, right? I always try to look at it as, especially when we're talking about sports or entertainment, sometimes you're shocked by, if you're such a great player, it just doesn't matter. But we both know that also happens in corporations, right? If you're a top executive or you're a top salesperson, people often get away with a lot more than others would. To me, it's pretty simple when you start looking at some of these situations. What would happen in the workplace if I had promoted some anti-Semitic types of materials or others around my colleagues or in social media, right? I would be terminated on the spot. And yet with Kyrie, what happened to him initially, Tom? Nothing.
I would
Literally
say nothing,
right?
but he was
Literally
asked
nothing.
a question at a press conference.
Right. No, but it was, he may not think he did anything wrong. The rest of the world certainly thinks it's problematic. And with the rise of anti-Semitism and, violence and things that are happening out there, it's serious. And that I personally take it very seriously because my wife and kids are Jewish. My daughter plays on the Israeli national team in lacrosse. It is outrageous what we have to talk to them about these days. Kanye West and Kyrie Irving and people like that are well-known figures, very popular, and they can influence a lot of minds. And yet the Nets did nothing. All of a sudden there was a bunch of public backlash, and so what did they do? They put out a statement saying that the owner and Kyrie were donating $500,000 to fight anti-Semitism, right? Which is great. Want any money out there. But between a Russian oligarch owner of the Nets and Kyrie Irving, who's made hundreds of millions of dollars, I don't think it had a big impact on them, right? That's just what we like to refer to as window dressing at the end of the day. The Nets have been an interesting one. If you look back at Kyrie, and everybody comes down on the vax thing, you can be anti-vax or those kinds, but there were regulations and rules that were in place, and he was not permitted to play in New York, and so half the games at home, he was not permitted to play at the end of the day. And, but they still paid him his full salary. They still didn't do anything in terms of discipline. And then these actions take place. I mean, to me, it's wildly disappointing that the Nets, would put themselves into this position, but they clearly have taken the view of, we care about winning basketball games. we don't necessarily care about the rest. But when you're this public and, and you have that kind of influence, I think you have a bigger responsibility as an organization, whether it's in corporate America or whether it's in the sports world, to take a stand, right? And to finally do something, even for superstars.
So let's elevate that last point to the NBA, because they have not done anything. And in preparing for this podcast, I did see that Adam Silver, the commissioner, announced he's planning to meet with Kyrie Irving. But they still have made a statement against his remarks, but they've done nothing.
Nothing.
They haven't even called a press conference on it. So it's just mind-boggling that this statement, and also, Stephen, when Kyrie Irving said he was a flat worlder, we all laughed and thought, well, maybe he's just wears lots of tinfoil hats.
Right.
And then he moved to an anti-vaxxer, and you and I both were not anti-vaxxers, but we knew people who were, and some did it on a principled approach, some did it for other reasons. But those were positions he took that were either idiotic or internal to him. But this statement, this really was hate. And this was hate speech and a hate movie and a hate book. And I really felt like he crossed the line here. And I don't know if he understands that he crossed a line. If he's entitled to his own, thinks he's entitled to his own opinions and sharing those, but by promoting this type of hate speech, I felt like he really went over the line. And I fully agree with you that this should have just been automatic termination. The reason they're called the Brooklyn Nets is they play in Brooklyn. Guess
Right.
what the world's largest city of Jewish population is? Brooklyn, New York, bigger than
Right.
Tel Aviv. And, for him to say that in that place, it's just beyond outrageous.
Well, you also have to take a stand at times, right? I mean, there are some things that people have difference of opinion. There are some things that are political in nature. There are debates that you can have. Anti-Semitism or hate speech is not one of the debates we can have. And unfortunately, we have way too many people that have a lot of social media clout, or political leaders or others that over the recent times have been espousing hate. And what are we seeing? We're seeing things like, Kyrie Irving thinking it's comfortable and fine to broadcast this to his millions of followers. You've got violent attacks happening. There's a direct correlation. I looked up, attacks on, Jewish Americans in the United States are up a staggering percentage now, right? And all of this continues to feed into, that perception. And frankly, with Kyrie, the fact that he supported it and doesn't see anything wrong with it, if I was the owner of that organization, he would have been gone. Like, it wouldn't have even been a tough call. And yet, not only did the Brooklyn Nets not do anything, but Adam Silver, the head of the NBA, took no action, is just amazing to me. And, how many days are we in? 5 days out of this, initial thing, or, something like that. And,
5 to 7.
yeah, that the NBA is just kind of waiting for it to pass. Which is what corporations do sometimes, right? They weather the first storm, they don't have to take action, and then people move on to the next issue. And to me, that's what it looks like the NBA is doing, which is really disappointing.
So we were both, I think, outraged by not only his statement, but the team's reaction and the NBA's reaction. But really, the next set of facts, and I'm going to leave Steve Nash's termination out, is just beyond belief to me, Stephen.
I
So we have
actually kind of laughed when I saw it. Like, I was like, well, that about makes perfect sense. Is how I was looking at the Nets when I first saw it pop up on my phone.
So you have a coach who accepted a 1-year suspension, a form of discipline, less than termination, nevertheless a significant disciplinary action or inappropriate sexual remarks or sexual harassment. And once again, we don't know the specific details of it, other than he was involved with a administrative employee in a consensual affair. First of all, should organizations vet or hire people who are under suspension for conduct that hopefully is in violation of their codes of conduct.
Right. Look, again, that doesn't seem like that tough of a call to me, right? Whenever we've done due diligence on, whether it's personnel, whether it's third parties or agents or other things in the compliance world, if there are red flags, you have a duty to spend a lot of time checking into those. If somebody's under active suspension in the NBA by another team, it seems illogical to me at best. That's probably being nice that you would then turn around and hire that coach. Now, the Brooklyn Nets know him. He coached there. I'm sure they think he's a great guy and was probably just having a consensual affair. But the thing that troubles me about it is what message does that send to the women in the Nets organization? What message does that send to the fans, the women fans that are out in the NBA? And what does it also tell your players, right? Hey, you can go out and do things that'll get you fired and do stupid things, but you can come here and you'll be fine. We don't have any problem with it. And that's quite an organization. I mean, it's not exactly what you would say is, taking the ethical principled approach. But it does show you that they want to win a championship because that's what they seem to be interested in.
Let me focus on your thoughts, Stephen, around what message it sends to the female employees and why sexual harassment, the power dynamics behind it are so not only invidious to the women, but it actually destroys a culture of an organization. Could you give us your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, look, with the Me Too movement and things that have happened, certainly women have been able to stand up and take action against, a number of executives or, entertainers or others. But it's a incredibly difficult road, right? Half the time people don't believe you. Half the time accusers get targeted from any number of ways. I mean, we've seen that as an example in the Supreme Court. An accuser steps up and what happens? She's attacked for doing that. The same unfortunate circumstances happen often in sexual assault cases as well, right? And, in jury trials. And so it is an incredibly difficult thing for somebody, a woman who in an organization to be able to step up and say, I was harassed, or this person discriminated against me, or this person sexually assaulted me. We can't really appreciate how difficult that is. And the only way that you're able to, effectively address those situations is where you have an environment where people are comfortable talking and speaking up and doing that. And I think if you're a Nets employee today and you see this new coach coming in, even if it was a consensual affair, it's still wrong, right? Like you said, it violates the code of conduct. We all know that it's improper. But basically, what you're saying to all your employees is, hey, there may be rules of the road, but when it comes to our star players or our coach or trying to win a championship, we're not going to worry so much about those. And if I was a Nets employee, it might, you might really like working the NBA, but it would seem to me that that's a terrible culture at the moment, right? And something that doesn't seem to be a place that is supporting, both like a code of conduct and, doing things in an ethical way, but also sending the direct opposite message, which is it's win at all costs.
Let me focus now on the issue of trust at the workplace. And you mentioned the Me Too movement had encouraged and supported women to raise their hand and speak up. It has encouraged and supported bystanders who step forward. But the opposite is true when you have a case like this. And if someone new is brought into an organization, they are known or other information is available that they have engaged in this conduct, I think it really inhibits the entire speak up culture of that organization. Obviously, for legal violations, but speak up is much broader and much beyond simply reporting legal violations. It's speaking up about how to improve your products, services, or goods. And so, I guess the thing I'm left with, Stephen, is um, I started off by what's the culture of this organization. Unfortunately, I think we've answered that question, but it seems to me that not only is it a toxic workplace, but it is as dysfunctional a culture as we could have an example of.
Oh, I think there's not much question. I think there's probably a parallel in pro football that we'll talk about that, the Washington football team. I suspect that might be one of our upcoming podcasts, given the recent news yesterday and today. But if you look at the NBA right now, I mean, there's no question there's some owners that would have taken a different stance. There's definitely some organizations that would have approached this in a different way. But all indications from what the Nets and how they're doing things are, that it really is just a win at all cost type of a culture, that they're not so interested in, the impact that they're having on their fan base, the impact that they could be having, in terms of, frankly, helping escalate violence and hate rhetoric. To me, that was an immediate, separation from Kyrie Irving at the end of the day, and they didn't do it. And then you're teaching your employees that, we will hire anybody, no matter what the issue might be, as long as that person could possibly win for us, right? Or the player that's going to be on the field, no matter what he says, or on the court in this case. That's the most important thing. And if you have that, you're working in a culture that simply is not too worried about ethics and doing things the right way. To me, that's not a place you'd want to work. That doesn't seem like a very comfortable, fun place to be at the end of the day.
So, a pretty dramatic set of facts for our first episode. Hopefully, they won't all be this dramatic, but or at least train recognize. But I look forward to seeing what the next couple of weeks brings us, Stephen.
Yeah, no, it'll be fun. I look forward to this conversation. This podcast is going to be really interesting. And, for our listeners out there, we're always happy to get ideas of, sports that you want us to talk about. I think Tom and I, as we move along, we'll probably try to tackle a little bit more exotic sports as well, right? And see some of the issues because, as we all know, these things happen all over the world. And, it could be in corporations, it could be on sports teams, it could be in politics. There's lots of interesting things. But I think as compliance officers and, legal professionals, I think watching what happens in some of these organizations and learning for it teaches us a lot about, what's the difference in our culture and how do we help do a better job than some of these folks that are out there hitting the news all the time.
Till next time, Stephen.
Great, Tom. We'll see you soon. Go Astros, right?
Go Astros.
That was a pretty.
This is Tom Fox again. Thank you for listening to this episode of Sports and Compliance. I hope you'll join Stephen and I again, where we take another dive into the intersection of sports and compliance.